So my presentation is about biodiversity. That's what we're really concerned about. And it does tell the truth about what's really happening to our beautiful country, a transformation that will become permanent unless hearts change. At the same time, I want to give people a hope that it's still not too late to have some influence on government. What really supports government departments is decision-making, and that's up to us, really, to gather robust scientific information and make our observations really matter biological information. So for people in this room that are probably on our space already, you all know about nature, what we're doing here. Lots of you will be using our naturalist and use different apps. We encourage you to work directly with government if you're running serious projects. The government has to have information at our Department of Science here in Queensland. Otherwise, it's too difficult for them to gather it from apps all over the countryside. So download Wildlife Queensland app, especially if you're trying to record koalas. We have only four categories on that app at the moment. There are options for crocodiles, cassowaries, koala, and marine strandings. They won't put more species on like spectacled flying foxes until citizen scientists and the ordinary public start using what's already available on the WildNet database and the WildNet app. And for BirdLife, we would really like people to put their bird data into BirdLife Australia because they work directly with the federal government to influence decision-making. So Queensland's landscape suffers from being rich in minerals. Do you remember Anna Blyth saying it's a mineral state where miners get used to it? Most of the state, 80% of it has a mining lease. You know that Lock the Gate fought very hard to keep coal seam gas away from Gympie and Maryborough, and to have those industries right on the coast in those communities that are not empty, they're not needing that type of industry, was very, very confronting for the people that lived there. So we have had, since 2010, a lot more gas added to our coal mines. At that stage, we were also looking not just at Adani, but JVK and about 7 really huge mines. We've got forest logging and continuing. We've stopped logging in southeast Queensland forests, but we've pushed them out to the west. We have urban development, wind and solar, and battery storage now is becoming a huge issue. We have critical minerals to add to that complex. Very little headway was made by community groups in the gas fields. In 2010, a lot of communities suffered enormously. State forests in the Surat and Bowen basins have been critically fragmented. This is what they look like now. Back then, those forests were fairly intact. Every single white dot is a gas well, and they will say to you it's just a tennis court. It's not, it's 2.5 acres, because they brought in very large pipes and very large pieces of equipment. So when the well is established, they put a little box around it and call it a tennis court. It's a little fence, but the bush is basically maintained, it's cleared around it, because obviously for fire, that's safer for the gas wells. So that's Condamine, Braemar, Cumberilla, special forests out there, the Debrigalo and so on, are now looking like this in our landscape. And that's a lot. Cumulatively, people say it's a small fragment, but you've got to add those fragments too, clearing for farming, clearing for all the other things that we're going to discuss. So I did grab this from AI, I declare, because that's apparently not fashionable, so I don't know why we're busy saving energy for AI. As of mid-2024, there are 18,500 petroleum and gas seam wells in Queensland, so you can see what that looks like on mapping. Over 12,000 drilled specifically since 2010, and that's to support liquid natural gas exports to other countries. The total number include both active production wells and those in various stages of operation. Total wells, 18,500, CSG focus 14,800, location 90%, 95% of CSG wells are situated in the Bowen and Surat basins, which is basically central Queensland right down to Roma and south. Recent approvals in March 2026, the federal approval was granted for 1,600 new gas wells in rural Queensland, and one of those developments is 6,000 wells. So we think we're getting rid of coal and gas by doing our renewables, but there you go, we're not actually. So it's great for employment and it's great for industry, but it's not very great for nature. And here we have a koala. Everybody's concerned about koala. I'm really concerned that we don't count the other things. I mean, we don't know if little geckos that used to occur 100 to each tree are now down to 5 per tree, because nobody counts small things. we have koala apps, and it's very difficult. That's why I say use WildNet's app, because if someone goes to Gympie and uses Gympie's council app and says, I found 15 koalas on such and such road yesterday, somebody goes down and uses another koala app, the government one, and says, I found 12, that doesn't make it that amount added together. It means that you probably saw some that the person saw the day before. So we get really unreliable data. So it's really, if we possibly can, we should be giving our information direct to government to make it just as reliable as possible. Anyway, a good example of using data was a miner who had done underground gold gasification and pulled the pin on it out at Kingaroy was going to displace the farmers out there. Again, this isn't vacant land, come in, we need a coal mine. This is peanut farmers, graziers, pig farmers, people living there on generational farms, hoping to hand them down to their sons, but you can go somewhere else because someone comes along, he brands himself as Moreton Resources, comes back to have a second pick at this community. And I was working with Lock the Gate, and I said, you know, none of us get to fight anything on the back of NIMBY. You know, lock your gate, that's fine, but you need to know what's beyond your gate. So that miner called that system degraded farm landscape with eroded creeks. So we went and did 4 seasonal surveys. In fact, we found a threatened regional ecosystem, 1 vulnerable, koalas all over the place. I don't find koalas particularly hard to find. I found 7 in 1 day, 15 rare plants, and a couple of those were incredibly rare. And so there were multiple matters of national environment significance, which means that he should go to the federal government and follow through a full EIS so he passes the EPBC Act. Now, most people try to avoid that because it's expensive. It's $1,500 a day for an ecologist. It's at least $40,000 or $50,000 to get a report at that time. So he was called in. He has to pay for mine rehab, offsets, and he has to do full EIS, and he had no money. So that mining lease was taken away, and the people in Kingaroy were able to continue to live on their land. That was actually a first by science, which is really pleasing. This is a picture of Goodyear. These are really special, productive farmlands, good soils. I don't understand why one industry has to displace another industry. Anyway, it was a very nice outcome, and this is Deb Frecklington's backyard, so she was happy. She didn't want the mine, but she didn't want to say she didn't want the mine. Queensland Protected Area Strategy 20 to 2030. Queensland's home to twice as many native wildlife species as any other Australian state or territory. Half of the species living in Queensland are unique to the state. Queensland's home to 72% of our native birds, 85% of native mammals, 50% of reptiles and frogs. And in all fairness, see, we think, you know, we've got a low protected area state at 8.6. We should be 17 to 20%, and it has to be representative of all our regional ecosystems, or at least our places of rich biodiversity. But it is still a lot of land to maintain because we're such a big state. So we do have 1,000 national parks, which is quite wonderful, and a lot of good people trying to look after them as well as they can on a limited budget. We have 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and we have 5 significant wetlands listed under Ramsar Convention. And most of you probably know the fight we had at Toondah Harbour to stop 3,600 apartments going on that Ramsar site. Under protection, 8.6, we should be at 17 to 20. 4 years ago, when Minister Scanlon was Minister of the Environment, Tanya Plibersek came up and promised us 30 by 30. We're halfway through 26. It's going to take us a great deal of courage to get to 30 by 30. So the Brigalow Belt is an area that we're very concerned about because very, very little of it is in the protected area state, and it is an endangered ecological community. And despite many good projects, farmers rehabilitating, a lot of them have had gas, they've had degraded land from landscape, from grazing, so their landscapes are receiving investment off the offset funds to try and improve the Brigalow and plant it and bring it back. But as much as you plant some like we're doing here, we're also cutting down more Brigalow for more gas wells. So it's sort of a counterbalance, isn't it? That is one wind farm just north of Barracuda. So the green on the bottom is Barracuda, which is very rich it's really, it could be an arboretum. It has such amazing plants in it. It's one of the few places in this part of eastern Queensland that has spinifex grasses and scald country, so we would like that into the protected area state. But again, trying being a bit of Brigalow and escape CSG and now escape the wind and the other things that are upon you, and logging is a fairly serious challenge. So there's 69, just out there alone, there's 69 energy generation projects in that region, 28 existing projects that are there, 34 proposed projects, and 7 under construction, 1 solar, 3 wind, and 3 battery storage. So this is what concerns me, really. We can have spotter catchers catching koala. Look at all these other gorgeous things. They deserve to be. They're sentient beings. The rights of nature is these little things deserve to be in the trees, and when the trees are coming down, you'll see what happens. They contain these animals. So one of the other things, so I want to acknowledge particularly the courage of the Rainforest Reserves people. There's not a group that have received more criticism and been vilified by politicians and industry, but they have said, this is their backyard. They're living up there. They're trying to tell us they are witness to the mountains being blown up. So they have shared these images with Stephen Nowakowski Panescapes has shared these images to bring to you today. And I think for people that are living in that area, it is really, really a great concern to see mountains that are World Heritage standing receiving really heavy industry impacts. So this is Stephen up at Lotus Creek. This is a community of people. These people here are living next to the battery storage at Bouldercombe, at Biloela, which went on fire. That was very frightening for them because they had to wait for fire tenders to come from Gladstone, I think. And a lot of volunteers in the Rural Fire Brigade are very worried because they don't know how to deal with industrial fires. These big battery storages can't be put out. They have to burn out themselves. And I was having this conversation with someone in the industry who said, oh, I think China's making them with better steel now. Well, I hope they are, because apparently some of the blades at the Warwick farm are already dropping off, and that's only been operational for 2 years. So the following night we went to Biloela, and Colin Boyce has in his electric 74 applications, and that room had about 300 very upset farmers and landholders in the room. And who are we to judge how they feel when they're having, you know, so much impact on their daily lives? So this is a turbine blade. This is half the length of some of the ones that are going up. So this is Upper Burdekin wind farm blade, 100 meters in length, and nearly double these. Mount Emerald project was $383 million project and had the potential to power 75,000 homes when the wind was blowing. That's another one. Now, the Warwick farm at Gore had 188 turbines. That's 5 stacks, 3 blades, at least 1 helping of concrete and steel. So that's at least 10 transports from the Port of Brisbane to Warwick, times 188. That is 2,000 vehicle transports up the Warwick Highway, usually at night, so we don't see it, and so they don't obviously interrupt daily traffic. One crashed into a bridge near me, and where I live in the west of Brisbane, it's taken a year to mend a little overpass on the Warwick Highway. Imagine what the villages feel like when they see this sort of industry coming through. This is bushwalkers on Mount Emerald. Stephen's given this, and he said, I remember it as a place with rocky outcrops and wonderful wildflowers. That was 2004, and that's what it looks like now. All of these ridge lines will be developed as World Heritage Value, climate refugia, and natural carbon sinks. These are functioning carbon sinks, and we're degrading them. 2026, this is what the landscape looks like. Notice the bus at the bottom, it looks quite insignificant, really. So, will this become as a video? What do I have to do to make this a video, guys? What did you press to play that one? I'm sorry, I didn't notice which button. This is another video, and then there's one more after it. sewage line on the Mount Emerald wind farm. There's no one rescuing anything that's nesting in these trees. And this was endangered northern coal habitat. Stephen wrote, at the time I felt very chuffed that North Queensland was punching way above its weight in supplying renewable energy to the electricity grid. North Queensland now had, at that time, the following renewable projects up and running, and at Mount Emerald, Marion Gorge, Hydro, Windy Hill, Lakelands, that's a dreadful name, Kumbalumba Hydro and Corelia Hydro, combined energy power 150,000 homes. However, I subsequently learned the Mount Emerald wind farm can only operate at 75% capacity because the transmission lines to the grid cannot cope. If this was the case, why weren't the number of turbines reduced so less impact on habitat and most likely save $50 million or so in the process? Nevertheless, this is what we need to do, and there are smarter minds looking at this right now, how they can be more effective. So, of course, in habitat destruction, you know that always the solution is offsets. So offsets should deliver no net loss, and they should be like for like. That means if you destroy a little pocket of Bigelow, you must repair it with a little pocket of Bigelow. If you can't do that, you put money in the bucket. And a lot of money has been sitting in the bucket for a long time. We hope that the government will spend it to acquire greater protected areas or spend it to help people to repair country. But Professor Martin Marin will tell us all, of course, it simply doesn't work. So for the battery storage system outside Ipswich on the edge of the Bremer River, there's an offset out at Mount Walker, and it just basically is an old farm paddock that's completely cleared, and someone will get money to plant some trees. They're not available to koalas. That's actually for the Save Woodford Forest, I beg your pardon, at Springfield, which has koalas. Planting some trees out at Mount Walker won't be viable for, you know, a family of koala for at least 20, 100 years or whatever. So it's just not working, but projects are expected to have no net loss of native ecosystems or habitat in the local government area. Proponents should strive to preserve and enhance biodiversity on the project site and should prioritise any required biodiversity offset to be undertaken within that government area, and any required stewardship payments should be within that local government area and employ local people. So here we've got a huge commercial investment, but at what cost to Queensland's biodiversity? So these figures, when you look at them, 10,000 turbines, the solar farms, the water. Water's a major problem for the farms up in central Queensland because the graziers' aquifers are going down. It takes a lot of water to make the quantity of cement required for this quantity of turbine platforms. So this is down in the Nullarbor. Anybody been across the Nullarbor here? Hands up. It's like the Hay Plain. Everyone says there's nothing in it. I had a competition with someone driving across the Hay Plain. We stopped our car every 5 kilometres. You do 20 minutes, you do 20 minutes, come back with how many things you find. So the person I was travelling with would say, how many did you get? No, you tell me how many you get, because you're just going to try and beat me. And we got so many things, but it's just flat. And it's like the Mitchellgrass Downs. People think they're empty. Nowhere is empty. They're all little niche environments for very specific things that live there and are home to those areas. The Nullarbor has birds that are not anywhere in Australia. And everyone that goes across the Nullarbor, especially in bird watching, wants to go to the south of Shane's Beach and things, the south of West Australia to get Western Australia endemic birds. All these places are very precious. They have their own systems, and that's what the Nullarbor is going to look like. I think it's horrible. This is, so on the Rainforest Reserves mapping, you will be able to see now, at the moment their website's probably not working very well because they took the Upper Burdekin to the federal court as a court case, a challenge to the EPBC Act. And they're sort of having to be very careful and lie quiet at the moment. But there are cards here for Protect the Bush Alliance. If you go to our work and drop down to the Great Dividing Range, and we did have an evening forum last October where we had significant people in the room from industry and from government to say, let's have a better conversation about this. We have the mapping on that, and if you go to the very, very bottom, open it up, it'll show you where, and it just literally is a reel that shows you where all the BESS, where all the solar, where all the wind is. And then remember, you're adding that to agriculture expansion, more cotton, more forestry, and it becomes cumulatively quite destructive. So that becomes like that. And they have to take 20 metres off all of these hills so the towers fall below the aviation limit. All of those ridge tops are planned to be destroyed. That's a typical industry site. One off to arrive at that. 100 wind towers at the Clark Creek wind farm on the Clark Corners Range. Another 98 to be built beyond that joins into Lotus Creek. And I did go up to the Clark Creek to that community forum that we saw with Stephen sitting at the desk. And I couldn't go down the mountain and come back that day, so the following day I went to Marlborough and went in the back of the range and went to the back. And I walked up and some people were coming down the hill, so I just opened the gates and sort of, ushered them through. I didn't, ask them for $1. But anyway, nobody spoke English at all. So they have filled up China, apparently, with battery storage, and they're now filling up Australia with battery storage. So they've got to come, the people that have got experience that have done it in other countries are coming here to teach our technicians and engineers how to do big battery storage. And they are huge, they are very, very confronting. And they do make a noise, they just hum. So the Clark Creek, wind towers and haulage roads and forest listed as of concern. Green is remnant, white, of course, is cleared land. So you can see that the route here is going into, the edge of the yellow and things like that. So 5,000 wind towers, 7,000 haulage roads, 154 solar works, 91 BESS, 11 pumped hydros, length of new transmission lines backed up by new gas plants to keep the lights on when they don't work. So Mount Emerald capacity, this is just a summary of the Mount Emerald one. It's median capacity, 22% capacity factor. 21 days of Mount Emerald produced 0. 76 days of Mount Emerald produced 5.5% capacity. And Stephen described that as, do we need this? It feels like an overbooked flight going to paradise. Paradise is lost, that's my quote. Paradise is lost if we don't engage and learn more. So controlling the narrative is quite surprising how many government meetings I've been in. I've put my hand up, and I do wonder why, as Chair of Conservation of BirdLife, when we look at wind in the south of Australia, and we now know people that are working on birds of prey, for instance. We may not have eagles in Victoria within the next 10 years. Why would they not expect someone representing bird life? Obviously, I'm just southeast Queensland. We go out to Longreach, out to the desert, down to New South Wales. But we have groups in Mackay and Cairns and so on, and we all talk to each other, and we're all a bit worried about this, of course, because we know that when the birds and bats and things are killed, they say that it's only one per whatever. And I've heard people say, oh, it's approximately 1 a month. Well, that's if you go and look for them. And most little birds that happen to be killed will be on the ground and eaten by ants or devoured by another predator overnight. And it depends on the velocity of the wind and how many turbines happen to be going, because there's a sort of suction system going on, and actually finding the birds where they land, where they fall, and going and hoovering them up in the morning isn't possible. So wind farms affect birds mainly in collision risk. How am I doing? I've got 10 minutes. Excellent. Pardon? 39, so I might just get there. Wind farms can affect birds mainly through collision risk and displacement. So I was always concerned that when I put my hand up to ask a question, nobody would take my hand, or I'd be told, no, Sheena, and they go to someone else. Or they say, oh, that's nothing, it's only 1 point something. You know, it's not a statistic. Place is really, really important. We've got to be careful where we put these developments, because they're going to places that are very special. So BirdLife has developed something called AVSTEP. It's an international, it's a tool that's been designed by BirdLife International. We're very lucky to have it here in Australia. It was launched at the Australian Ornithological Congress in Perth in November. And it basically, if industry uses it, it basically arrives down through layers of vegetation, a huge matrix of information into it, which says, don't go there. You can't go there. Like we stopped, for instance, shale gas fracking in the Lake Eyre Basin. That had to be done. It was such a bad idea. So post-construction monitoring and adaptive management are essential to ensure that mitigation measures are working. Monitoring impacts on offshore wind farms is particularly challenging, as carcass detection and tracking seabird movement at sea is difficult. I mean, you just won't find them, that's all there is to it. Which makes pre-construction assessment and avoidance planning even more critical. Thankfully, BirdLife is a very influential organisation. They have about 330,000 members, and we have people that work directly with the federal government. That's why it's important to put our bird data into bird data directly to BirdLife Australia, because they're able to work with our federal agencies to help them in this planning. And there's collaboration with scientists, industry, and government. It's improving, and it's growing a commitment to biodiversity positive renewables. And BirdLife Australia launched AVSTEPs, and we have a conference here on the 25th of July at Cirime, that's the Queensland Ornithology Congress, and Dr. Golamar, who's head of AVSTEPs and head of science, is going to come to Brisbane to describe this to birdwatchers and to industry that will attend that day. So this is AVSTEP. Avian Sensitivity Tool for Energy Planning is a spatial decision supported tool. I won't say too much about it because you can go on and read it on the internet. That's a nice thing. None of us need to know nothing. We can get it from anywhere. Good old Google. So this is unfortunately what happens. There was at the conference, there was some very interesting technology being developed. One person had a huge frame that he could basically lie in his field and now recognize the movement of birds. So obviously a lot of ducks fly at night, a lot of water fowl fly at night because it's safe to do so. And you don't know what they are, but these recognizers actually recognize the profile of the birds in flight. And one of them, he put up and he said, do you know what they are? And it was a flock of little jacana. You know how you see a little lotus bird on lily pads, 2 or 3 of them in a dam, and you think, oh, aren't they divine? You don't usually see 30 or 40 of them traveling together, so obviously Mama Bird had gone and said, come on guys, let's get up. There's some good rain up there. We'll go and find another little pond for ourselves. So they go at night. So people are developing some really super recognizers and some super technology which will help industry and help us to know what's happening. So we hear it constantly, we need renewable energy. Now the government has amended the EPBC Act to speed up renewable energy and critical mineral mining approvals, and it rings alarm bells. One thing is certain, we need biodiversity, the life-supporting ecosystems that sustain insects, birds, bees, bats, mammals, reptiles, frogs, and countless other species, including us. So thank you for being here. We've time to ask some questions of all levels of government and industry rather than swallowing this bitter pill. We swallowed a lot of bitter pills here because we are a mining state. Critical minerals is difficult. A big shout out to a young woman called Jodie Croker up at Proserpine, who's been working very hard for probably 4 years for her community because she's going to get a gold mine. And the gold mine has done no hydrology report. If it's been done, it's certainly not publicly available. It's not on their website. Government won't supply it. So why wouldn't you worry about a mine 40 k's from the coast on the Barrier Reef that's supplying fresh water to 50,000 people, about 50,000 people. So it's really important, and that's just in Whitsunday. So I'm sure you're all on Facebook, you know. I'm just astonished that any politician wants to put anything on his Facebook at the moment, because you might say, oh, there's 500 comments here, and I'm going to read them, and there's probably 2% of them are actually positive. Some of them are incredibly rude, so they're being very brave to sort of say, oh, we're having this wonderful renewable energy, you know, and we're going to sell our energy abroad and we're going to pipe it across to Indonesia and they'll give us our coal back or something. It's also incredibly complex. I'm not trying to make this sound at all easy. I'm saying it is incredibly complex, but I don't think we're getting it right. And I'm happy to stand up here and say I'm very concerned about it, because I think we're doing a lot of damage to our carbon sinks, to the integrity of our mountains. And people say, well, suck it up. It's what we've got to do for the greater good. Well, I'm yet to be convinced, and I think we all need to be convinced that the decisions that are being made are really for the greater good. So that's probably all I need to say this morning. Anyone, any particularly challenging questions? Yes. I knew I would get 1 or 2 questions like that, and I did some homework and wrote them down. It's in the front seat of my car, actually. Are you Hayley's mum? Yeah, thank you. I'll come and see you. So I will hang around if anybody wants to ask any questions. And that is hard. We don't know. There's a lot of applications. So when Murray Watts got in, it was very much, let's spend a year reviewing the EPBC Act. And we've actually been waiting for Murray Watts to come out, you know, with his magic wand and say, we're going to do good things for the world now. He's been there for nearly 2 years. I'm still waiting to see something really magic from Murray Watts. And in fact, what they did in December, which was a review of the Act when they told us about it, and it's been, as you know, scrutinized by people that, you know, whose job it is. They're really smart scientists. And I don't think we're convinced that it's going to do much more than be a green light for industry. You know, we're just going to hurry up and let things through, and we're not going to bag people down in red tape and green tape. Let's get on with these. If it's in the national interest, you don't have to even do an EPBC Act. Who decides it's in the national interest? It might be for big companies, and a lot of them, as Mark said yesterday, for water. Foreign companies. People, I just can't believe how many emails I get. I'm just so distressed by it. People in Illawarra that are getting a lot of really, really, I do get stressed about it because then I forget who told me. Someone did a breakdown of all the investment that was happening in their shire around Wagga, and a lot of it is Chinese, foreign, international companies. And the farmers are very concerned that they don't have control over who turns off and on the power. So if we are in political different times, we need to be in control of our own power grid. And that's very hard when people move off country. The other thing is, if people are getting about $30,000 per annum per turbine, if you've got 10 in your farm out at Dalby or something and you've got $300,000, why would you get up and worry about a dirty cow in the morning or going out to, you know, lamb a sheep in the cold mornings or something? You can just go to the coast and leave your land. So then your land's not cared for, it's out of farm production. And it's a highway for more ferals and more plants, weedy plants and the spread of weeds that are not cared for on good land by good land management by farmers being on their properties. I don't know how much that's happening, but that came on a Zoom meeting, evening forum about a month ago, when one person actually said my father-in-law wasn't going to take them, but then he realizes it's quite a good idea because you can get quite rich. It's a lot of money coming in every year without doing any work. So it's complex. That's all I want to leave you with. It's complex, but my concern is for the biodiversity loss. And I thank the Rainforest Reserves people for giving the conservation sector a good kick because we were sitting back sort of saying, oh, we have to do this, we have to do this. And a lot of the conservation sector receive enormous funding from American philanthropists and other people outside this country who are really not at all concerned about our welfare or the welfare of our endemic species that we have nowhere else on the end of the world. And that's why we fought so hard for the Lake Eyre Basin. In Scotland as a child, we would talk about Buck and Wills, Great Eyre Basin, and Catty Thunder, and the Rock. And then we moved to New Zealand. So Australia's got a very important landscape, and I urge everyone to be really effective with politicians to make sure we get the best out of this. Thank you very much.